Dr. Donald Huber, the Emeritus Professor of Plant Pathology at Purdue University. Sounds like a pretty important title for an important guy. Don grew up on crop and dairy farms in Arizona and Idaho. He studied at the University of Idaho and also at Michigan State University. And he did several years in the U.S. military, where he worked on things like global epidemiology, national production capabilities, and national security. He spent 8 years as a serial pathologist at the University of Idaho. He taught, researched, and published at Purdue for 35 years. His specialty is soil-borne disease control, physiology of disease, and microbial ecology. Early in his military career, Dr. Huber studied the impact of nuclear war with the specific effects of fallout on agriculture and ways to recover from such an attack. Since he's retired, he teaches courses on anti-crop bioterrorism, and he serves as a consultant on biological weapons of mass destruction and emerging diseases. He spent 5 years growing cotton at Purdue to evaluate the disease interactions, and this work, as well as his other research, helped to give him a good background and understanding of the physiology of specifically plants which are sprayed with glyphosate, which, as you all know, is Roundup. Agriculture is a complete system that's based on interrelated factors, and in order to maintain ecological balance and health, it's really important that you understand how that system works as a whole. Anytime you change just one part of that system, you change the interaction of all the other components because they work together. It is impossible to change just one minor aspect without altering the entire system. Dr. Huber's research, gathered over the last 55 years, has been devoted to looking at how the agricultural system can be managed for more effective crop production, better disease control, improved nutrition and safety. The introduction of GMOs, or Roundup-ready crops, has dramatically affected and changed all agricultural components, including the plants, the physical environment, and pests and diseases. And of course, that means plant, animal, and human. I'm very pleased that Dr. Huber is able to be here with us tonight to share some of the implications that glyphosate or Roundup has on our health, our animals, and our soils. I can promise you that some of what he has to tell us may be surprising, perhaps even shocking, but most definitely important and serious. Welcome, Dr. Huber.
Thank you. If it's okay, I'll work off of this mic. I have to move once in a while. At my age, if I don't move, you can't tell the difference between rigor mortis and arthritis. So, but I need to change the slides here. My wife and I celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary a little over 3 years ago, and as we were sitting around discussing various aspects of raising our 11 children, we thought that maybe it would be appropriate if we just kind of shared a few of those lessons learned. In the military, after every operation, we get together and decide what worked, what didn't work, and kind of work those out. One of the things in raising our children, we were always looking for a better way to discipline, something that would have some logical consequences and relate back to them. It was always easy just to have a flat spot farm to sit on, and sometimes that's necessary. But one of the things that we found that worked very well when one of our children was kind of beyond the boundaries was just to take him for a car ride. Now, a lot of people have found the same thing. They settle down, you can communicate with them. It really has a tremendous impact from that discipline corrective aspect that you want to bring about. A lot of people say, well, it's just getting them away from the TV or giving them that one-on-one interaction. But we found that eye-to-eye contact really helps a lot, as you can see from one of those sessions. Works for nieces and nephews and grandkids. All of them works very well. So I just wanted to pass that around to you a little bit here for those of you that are parents or grandparents, here to share, a lesson learned, one of those lessons learned. Be talking a lot about nutrients. I've spent a lot of my time, my research on evaluating nutrient-disease interactions. Nutrients are components of the plant. They're components of our bodies, of our animal bodies. But they're a lot more than just components. They're the micronutrients especially get overlooked often, but they're the regulators, the activators, and the inhibitors of those physiologic processes. So that I've likened them here kind of to that 400 horsepower motor or engine that you have sitting out in a tractor, or you have that big engine in your car. It can't do any work until you turn the key on. It has a lot of potential, but it's not going to do anything for you until you hit the ignition. The micronutrients are like the ignition. They're the cofactors that make that system work. If we want to shut down a particular physiological system, we find a way to take a particular nutrient away from the enzyme that we want to stop. The product or the way we do that is through chelation. Now we use chelators for increasing solubility of nutrients or movement across cell membranes. But we also use chelators, and a chelator is a compound that can grab onto another element. We use those compounds, then, the chelators, to immobilize a particular critical element that's a cofactor for that engine that we call an enzyme. All of our herbicides, all of our weed killers, many of our antibiotics are chelators. The way they work is to grab onto that critical key that turns the engine on, immobilize it so that it can't function, and if it's a primary metabolism, shuts the system down. If it's a secondary metabolism, then it predisposes the system to some other effect. Glyphosate is a very powerful chelator, much different than our other weed killers. Our other weed killers like Tordon or Puma or Phenoxyprop, those are copper chelators, but they're quite specific. Glyphosate will chelate and immobilize any cation, any positively charged ion. Has tremendous ramifications then in this ecology that we call farming. And in farming, all we're doing is managing the ecology. That ecology is composed here, I've depicted it in the schematic, of 4 components. You have your plant at the top, you have the physical environment or abiotic environment, you have that very dynamic biological environment. You're stepping on 10 tons of living matter every time you step on an acre of soil. Very dynamic system. And then you have all of those stresses we call pathogens and diseases and insects. But it's the interaction of these 4 components in this diamond that are going to determine whether you have a healthy plant, a productive plant, or a nutrient-dense plant and product. Anytime we change anything in agriculture, it changes the interaction of those 4 components. We don't have any silver bullets. You may open the farm magazine and it'll tell you that, or it'll show you a picture of a Stinger missile as though you're just sending off a missile to solve a problem. We're managing an ecological system when we farm. We may use a silver bullet, but it's not doing just one thing, because it changes the interaction of all four of those components. Again, glyphosate's a very powerful chelator. It was first patented by Stauffer Chemical Company in 1964 as a metal chelator. Would work great in descaling your boiler. Grabs on to calcium, to magnesium, to copper, iron, to cobalt, to zinc, manganese, all of your cations. It does much more, though, than what it was patented for in 1974 as an herbicide. Glyphosate is a growth regulator, stunts the plant in sterile soil. It's a temporary stunting until the plant can recover those essential nutrients. It's an herbicide because it predisposes the plant to the soil-borne pathogens. It's like giving the plant a bad case of AIDS. It's one of the most potent antibiotics that we know of for many organisms. Been patented as an antibiotic to kill off your intestinal microflora. We rely on that microflora and that ecology in our intestinal tract, the GI tract, for all of our mineral and vitamin absorption. I'll show you what the impact of that is when we start looking at the human diseases like autism, like inflammatory bowel disease, like celiac disease. All of those interactions have a direct interaction and effect, are affected by glyphosate. Again, it's been a potent herbicide. So effective as an herbicide that it's the most abused chemical we've ever had, most heavily used chemical in agriculture. We've ignored all of the side effects because it's simplified weed control. Did such an effective job now that if you have a weed show up in your field, even late in the season, you feel like you've got to go out and kill every one of them so that you can sit next to your neighbor in church. It's become more of a religion in some of these aspects than it has a management tool. And especially when we look at the GMO crops. It enhances virulence of many of our pathogens. It's an organic phosphate, so it's very simple to make, very difficult to degrade. Consequently, it can be very persistent. It can be detoxified, not necessarily readily degraded.